If you have a Bible, open your Bibles to the book of Romans, Romans chapter number 1. Don't panic, we're not going back to Romans 8. Romans 1, verses 16 following says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith." Paul says that the gospel is the power of God. You don't have the power. I don't have the power. Washington doesn't have the power. The power is in the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as we embark on this brand new series, The Church Awake and Not Woke, we need to remember the source of our true power. Now, yes, we can clap for that. So to help kick things off just a little bit, I can think of a better guest than our special guest today, who is a graduate of Baylor University. He went to He went to USC Law School. He served 8 years in the United States Congress. He has authored several books. He currently hosts a Fox News show called Sunday Night in America. He's been married to his lovely wife, Terry, for 33 years. They have 2 adult kids. Let's welcome back to the great state of Texas, South Carolina's finest, Trey Gowdy.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be back in Texas. I got my middle sister. I have 3 sisters, so whoever says God won't give you more than you can handle did not have 3 sisters.
Yeah. Hey, Caroline, stand up. We want to welcome you. Caroline Gowdy right there. Yes. She's the one who did all the hard work behind the scenes when he was in D.C., wrote all those speeches. That Caroline did that. Gowdy did nothing.
Well,
right now, all you do is read a teleprompter.
First of all, using a teleprompter is a lot harder than you think it is. Particularly the older you get, the font size is kind of small. I'm having a hard time. But anybody who's watched my show knows I'm having a hard time with it. So I want to say how great it is to be back at your church. I met Ben. He was the very first person I met in 1982. My father dropped me off at Baylor University. I did not know a soul. My mom, to this day, is not happy about the fact that he dropped me off before the dorm was open. In his defense, he's a doctor, so he had a tea time. He had to get back and play golf. But Ben is the first person I met, and because he has a connection to South Carolina, of course, Dr. Young was a pastor in South Carolina. We're both sports nuts. Very first person that I met at Baylor University. We've been friends. Loved your mom. Your mom was one of the sweetest, kindest people.
Yep.
Your dad's okay. Ed Jr., of course, the handsome, charismatic one of the 3 brothers, and then Cliff, the talented of the 3 brothers.
That's true.
And it's so nice to be friends with you for 40-something years also.
Yes. Thank you, Trey. Thank you for the love. I appreciate it. Well, I'm going to ask a question that I get asked almost every week here, and people say, when is your friend Trey Gowdy going to get back into politics?
Never.
I get asked that all the time.
I don't think anyone who ever has worked in Washington has asked you that question, because all the people that work with me that have left already know the answer. I was talking to Ben backstage, and I don't want to be morbid, but it's a good way kind of to look at life. So I'm imagining that my wife is in the receiving line. Mm-hmm. I passed away. Hopefully she doesn't bring a date to my funeral, but she's there with my kids, what do I want people to say to her as she's going through the line? And I want them to talk about him being a prosecutor, that he was fair, that he stood up for people that had been victimized by crime, that he gave a voice to people whose voice had been rendered mute. That's what I want people to say. Washington, look, I met a lot of good people. You and I can argue about whether or not you think I was okay at it. I did not enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy something and you only got a little bit of life left in the grand scheme of things, you shouldn't do what you don't enjoy. And I didn't enjoy it.
But you were called to do it, so you did it.
I think, look, it took you 7 years to get your doctorate. It took me 30 minutes in a commencement exercise out of school.
True.
So I may be wrong about my stories. I think a guy wound up in a whale. He probably didn't want that. I think the Jewish people wandered around the desert for 40 years. They didn't want that. God calls you to be obedient, not necessarily successful, but obedient. I'm glad that I did it, but I do not, that is not where my worth came from. I want you to say he was a good husband, good father, and a good prosecutor. That's all I want you to say when you are going through what I hope is a really long line at my funeral.
Well, one thing that I want to say on behalf of our congregation is one of the reasons we love you and respect you is that when you were in D.C., you did not compromise. A lot of people, when they go to D.C. and they're there and they start drinking that water out of the Potomac, go crazy, but you stood by your morals and your values. And that's the way it should be done, but it's not always done that way.
Well, I tried to, and a big part of that is, the story of David. And then he had a prophet. Again, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, as you always do.
Yes.
I think Nathan maybe was the...
Yes.
So you need a Nathan in your life before you walk to the rooftop. I mean, having somebody tell you afterwards you shouldn't have done what you did, it's good if you have the Nathans that are on the rooftop with you.
Right.
And so Tim Scott and Johnny Ratcliffe from Texas, I surrounded myself with good people. And I know that's unpopular to say that there are good people who also are engaged in public service, but there are on both sides of the aisle. And so just like college, I hung around with a rough crowd in college, many of whom were from Houston. Not you. Who you surround yourself with says a lot about you, and it kind of marks what your path will be like.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about where we are right now as a culture. We talk a lot about that in private, and to me, the overwhelming emotion out there amongst folks is fear. I think people are afraid that they're watching, right now, the collapse of Western civilization as we know it.
Yeah, fear is one of the loudest voices. It can overwhelm your decision making. I would encourage people to embrace the caution. Caution is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Fear is debilitating. As you know, Terry and I went to Israel when I was 17. My wife's never been. Reads the Bible all the time, goes to church like she's supposed to. I wanted her to be able to put a spot with what she's read. So we're over there, and modern day Israel is one story, surrounded by people that aren't always crazy about your existence. But then I think back, okay, Jesus, his ministry, his life, his death, was while that country was being occupied by a foreign power. Mm-hmm. All right, he loses a voice vote to Barabbas, a murderer, a notorious criminal. I think about other people that I have admired, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King Jr. They suffered loss. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee that you're going to be in the majority even if you're right. There's no guarantee. It's never written that doing the right thing is also going to be popular. The Son of God lost a voice vote to a murderer. If it can happen to him, then I can spend a season in the minority too. The question is, how am I going to spend my time in the minority? Am I going to be a light so a dark world can see something? You don't need light when the sun's up. You don't need it. You need it when times are dark.
Right.
So what I would encourage people to do, live out the teachings of Christ, be that remnant. This book is a story of God's chosen people having tough times, really tough times.
Yep.
So I don't think America's immune from that. I think we go through tests. How do you pass the test? Follow the teachings of Christ.
Yeah, that's good. Talk to us about, we can clap for that too. I know recently in your show, you talked about George Soros. You hear people talking about him. A lot of people don't know who he is. Who is George Soros? How is he influencing or seeking to influence us, especially our court system?
You know, I think last Sunday's maybe the first time I ever mentioned his name. There's always a balance. Do you give attention to something? Do you not give attention to something? I mean, I wanted to talk about him because for my whole life, I grew up thinking that to be really rich, you had to be really smart. And he kind of makes me feel better that you can be really rich, but not necessarily really smart.
Point.
And I'll just confine it to the criminal justice realm, which is the one I know the best. Public safety is the preeminent function of government. I mean, to me, state and local government's job is to keep us safe, whether we're at church, whether we're at school, whether we are shopping. The notion that we're going to be made safer by having people who do not enforce certain laws or don't believe in enforcing certain laws or don't believe consequences for wrongful behavior, to me is crazy. And it's not just me. San Francisco just recalled a so-called progressive prosecutor. Los Angeles is on the verge of recalling a so-called progressive prosecutor. Our criminal justice system needs to be respected and worthy of respect, and it can certainly be improved. But to just summarily decide, this is against the law, but I'm not going to enforce it. I can't think of anything more anti-democratic than one person deciding that. And look, Soros wants to change our criminal justice system. He figured out I'm better off changing who the prosecutor is than hiring a bunch of defense attorneys. But the American people have also figured out public safety is really important to us. And you can have a good justice system and also have people safe.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about before is the whole concept of truth, that we're living in what some people are calling a post-truth culture. Talk to us about how you think that's affected us, not just in the courts, but other areas of life as well.
Well, again, I come from a job where that's what we were after. In fact, verdict means to speak the truth. So you're trying to get a verdict in the courtroom that speaks truth. I've always believed in truth. I go through these peaks and valleys in my life where I kind of argue with myself about how many things are provably true, but we have scientific truths and we have mathematical truths, so why would we not have moral truths? But you got to agree, and right now our culture is going through this battle over whether I am capable of defining my own truth. I mean, is truth what I say it is, or is there an objective truth? And then you have to ask yourself, okay, I believe in objective truth. We have it in math. We have it in science. Of course, we should have it in morality also. What is the source of that truth? What's the author of it? What's the source of it? But then we also, I think, real truth can withstand scrutiny, and it can withstand cross-examination. That's what I loved about the courtroom. I didn't, if my witnesses were telling the truth, I didn't worry about cross-examination. The truth can withstand any question. You know this, you're going to laugh at me. One of my favorite books in the Bible is Habakkuk, which a lot of people don't even know that book's in the Bible. A lot of preachers don't know that book's in the Bible. It's a tiny one. You don't hear a lot of sermons out of Habakkuk. But he's asking some really tough questions of God.
Yes.
I never for a moment when I read that book am I on the edge of my seat wondering if God can answer those questions. There's never a moment where, boy, that's a good one. I can't wait to hear the answer to that. I do believe in truth, but also think that we should not confuse our own personal preferences and opinions with that truth.
Yes. Right. And today we're living in to me, an insane time when people are equating their personal preferences or their emotions and their feelings with truth. And if you don't treat me as if my truth is truth, then I'm gonna persecute you, I'm gonna shame you, I'm gonna cancel you. I mean, when J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, not exactly a conservative, simply said a woman is a woman and a man is a man, and she's almost shamed off of planet Earth. I mean, to me, there's no more basic knowledge than male and female. That's about as basic as we get as human beings. But when that is being called into question in a culture, something's wrong, or I'm missing it. Help me.
No, I think sometimes in life we confuse volume with proportion. That the loudest voices we just assume are the most numerous voices. I think what you just said would be the majority opinion in this country.
Right.
But it maybe is not the majority message that we receive, whether it's from the media or social media or Hollywood or increasingly sports. So I remind myself, and I would also encourage others, do not confuse volume with size. Sometimes the smallest percentage is the loudest voice. And that doesn't make something any more true or less true. Volume and truth do not equate with one another. The other thing I would say, I like to take a step back. I don't know if Caroline remembers this or not, Ben. I remember like it was yesterday. In part, Olivia Newton-John passed away this past week. And my three sisters and my mom and I went to see Grease when it came out. And just when it started getting good, when she was dressing in black leather, my mom said, "Get up, we're leaving." And I said, "No, Mom, you should stick around for the rest of the movie. Plus, my entire junior high school class is in this movie theater. I know there's no way you're going to make me get up and leave a movie because someone is smoking a cigarette on the screen." But that's exactly what she did, Ben.
Yes.
She made us get up out of Grease, and she walked us out. My dad wouldn't let us watch Happy Days. My dad wouldn't let us watch Gilligan's Island. My dad wouldn't let us watch Sesame Street. He didn't want us talking like people from up north. And to be honest...
Hey, he succeeded.
And to be honest,
it
worked. It worked.
Yeah.
Is that cancel culture? Or is that parents deciding I'm going to be the filter through which my children get information? I never thought my mom was canceling Olivia Newton-John. I thought what she was doing is saying, I also vote with my money, and I vote with my eyeballs, and I vote with my ears. So if someone you like, an athlete, an entertainer, you think is being treated unfairly, go buy more of their product. Vote with your dollars, vote with your eyeballs, support them. I don't know that we're going to get to the point where, I don't know that you're going to change the mind of the mainstream media, the people through which information is filtered. I don't think you're going to. But if it is really a silent majority, they also have ways of fighting back.
Yeah, true. Talk to us about engaging with people who we disagree with. Because if people just saw the YouTube compilations of you grilling people, they would think, wow, Gowdy's this right-wing bulldog. But that's really not true. You had friends on both sides of the aisle. Just last night, we had dinner, and tell them about that couple that was seated next to us. It's pretty funny.
Well, I'm a little bit mad at Ben. He took me to a restaurant that required a shirt, so I had to go put a shirt on. We're not used to that in South Carolina, so I had to go put a shirt on. Took me to a restaurant, and he got up. I thought he was getting ready to go pay the bill, but then I remembered, well, no, that's Ben. No, he's not going to go pay the bill. But while he got up, there was this beautiful young couple sitting beside us, and the young man leaned over and said, are you the former congressman? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, I'm a Democrat, but I liked you. And I said, I hear that from my daughter all the time. So, and then he introduced me to the young lady that he was with. When you fight over murdered children, sexually abused children, rape cases, kidnapping cases, child pornography cases, fighting over whether the top marginal tax rate should be 34 or 32 just seems insignificant. And I've never learned something really of value during an argument. I've learned it during a conversation and a discussion. And if I'm trying to be persuasive, nothing is less persuasive than trying to humiliate or belittle the person that I'm talking to. I also, because I believe in truth, I'm looking for it. And it has to be able to withstand scrutiny and cross-examination, which means I have to listen to other people who have a different perspective. Number one, it's going to make me a better advocate for what I believe because I've anticipated what the other arguments are. It also forces me from time to time to reevaluate something that I believe to be true. I mean, if you believe in the truth, that you should not worry how the story ends. And so you should be okay asking tough questions and having other tough questions asked. I also am really, to be honest, Caroline probably knows this, I'm conflict averse. I had to do it for a living. But I am much happier if people are all getting along. I don't like manufactured conflict. I don't interrupt my guest on my show. I don't like yell and scream at people. It may be good for television, but it's not good for persuasion, and it's not good for relationships. So I'm on a lot of group text, which I think ought to be illegal, but they're not illegal right now. Plenty of Democrat friends of mine. You mentioned Elijah Cummings. I still talk to Joey Kennedy I've got a ton of people who have a different perspective, and it helps me to hear that other perspective so I can know that I am on the right track towards what I think to be true.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of truth, when you were in Israel, you kind of had a little bit of an epiphany about Christ and a question he asked, and
I had two epiphanies on the way to Israel. Number one is when you're offered an upgrade but your wife is not, do you take it? And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we've been married at the time 32 years. Will she be happy sitting back there by herself in economy? Probably not. Is it a divorceable offense? Honestly, I'm not sure. So I decided not to. We get there, and my wife is honestly the most Christ-like person I have ever been around in my life. And I wanted her to see all the places she'd read about. And we go to the spot where Jesus asked his disciples, who do they say that I am? And then, of course, a little bit later, I think, is also when he told Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. So I'm not sure what happened in the interim. Things seemed to be going pretty well, and then Peter said something ridiculous. But who do they say that I am? This is the Son of God asking. Who do they say that I am? And I wondered, while we were at that spot, if he asked you that question, or me that question, what would the answer be? Who do they say that you are? Who do your neighbors say that you are? Who do your coworkers say that you are? Who do your children say that you are? Do they say that you are a believer and that is number one in your life? Or do they say, well, he's a Republican, but he goes to church sometimes? Or do they say, he's a progressive, but he knows the books of the Bible? What is your identity? If it's good enough for the Son of God to say, who do they say that I am? Mm-hmm. I wonder what the answer would be if he asked us. Mm-hmm. Who do they say that you are? Mm-hmm. And if you don't like the answer, if you're being honest and you think, I'm not sure what the answer would be, and we probably ought to work on changing the answer.
Yeah. You talked about recently this quote by Chesterton that's been really impactful to you. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, G.K. Chesterton, British philosopher, author, lots of things. He said, "It is not that Christianity has been tried and found wanting or failed. It is that Christianity is really hard, and therefore it's rarely tried." And it is hard, and it's supposed to be hard. Mm-hmm. And there's no guarantee that it's going to be the majority view, but that does not make it less true. There's a difference between being in the majority and being right. So I think about what Chesterton said. It is rarely tried. It is hard. It is hard to love your enemies. It is hard to pray for those that persecute you. It is hard to be patient. It is hard to be kind. But I think we're called to do hard things. And if you want the answer, who do they say that you are? If you want the answer to be a flawed person that did his best to live out the teachings of Christ, then you got to try to live them out. And they're hard.
Let's thank Trey Gowdy for being here with us today. I'm going to do this. Trey has to catch a flight in about 2 minutes from now. I'm just kidding. But he has a flight to catch. I'm going to let him slip out. But again, I want to thank you so much for being here today, Trey. And I want to thank you for being salt and light in our culture today. And our prayers go with you as you head back to South Carolina. See you, brother. I love you, man. It was great, man. Great job. Great job.